The air was thick with silence, as if the forest itself held its breath. A single fawn stood motionless in the clearing, its delicate form frozen beneath the piercing gaze of the moonlight. Its fur shimmered in the pale light, almost glowing against the backdrop of towering trees. Every muscle in its small body was taut, every sense alert to the slightest sound. There was nothing but the rustle of the wind and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. But the forest was never truly silent. Beneath the trees, something stirred, an invisible presence that seemed to be watching. The fawn's delicate nostrils flared as it sensed a shift in the air. Slowly, as though it could feel the predator's gaze, the fawn's large, amber eyes flickered toward the shadows. It wasn't just the wind moving in the trees. There was something lurking, something waiting. As the fawn's heart raced, its instinct screamed to run, but its legs remained rigid with terror. In that moment, the world around it became a dark, endless maze, where survival was a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. There was no safety in the wild. The fawn's legs shook with fear as she sprinted through the underbrush. The darkness was thick, her breaths shallow and quick. Every sound felt amplified, branches cracking underfoot, the wind rustling through the trees. She knew she couldn't outrun the predator for long. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, creating fleeting patches of silver on the damp ground. Her heart pounded as she glanced behind, catching a glimpse of glowing eyes tracking her every movement. It was close. Too close. The predator's growls rumbled through the forest like an earthquake. She pushed forward, barely able to see the path ahead. With each leap, her muscles screamed in protest, but she couldn't stop. Survival was the only thought in her mind. Her body moved on instinct, jumping over fallen branches, dodging sharp rocks. The predator's shadow was everywhere now, and every time she looked back, its eyes seemed to get closer. The fawn's heart raced, her hooves slapping against the ground as the predator's growls grew louder. Her legs were beginning to buckle, and every part of her body screamed for rest. Yet she could not stop. The trees around her blurred into dark shapes, and her vision grew more fragmented. The predator's growls echoed from behind, louder and closer with each step. The fawn could hear its heavy breathing, the sound of claws scraping against the earth. Her muscles burned, and her mind screamed for a way out, but the path ahead was unclear. Her breath was ragged, her body trembling with fatigue. But still, the chase continued, an unstoppable force. With every step, the fawn's energy waned, her vision flickering with dizziness. Yet there was only one thing in her mind: escape. She couldn't stop. Not now, not when the predator's scent was so thick in the air. The cliff edge was closer now, and the fawn could see the vast drop below her. Her legs were unsteady, and each breath felt like a heavy weight on her chest. The predator's growls were so loud now that they seemed to vibrate through the earth. She could feel its presence behind her, like a shadow closing in. She had nowhere to go. The drop was her only option. She had to leap. It was the only way. The fawn's body moved on pure instinct, but the ground below seemed to drop away faster than she expected. With a burst of energy, she sprang from the edge, her limbs extended. But in the chaos, she had no idea where she was landing. Below, the trees stretched endlessly. The fawn's body slammed into the earth with a sickening thud. Her legs crumpled beneath her, and for a moment, everything went silent. The world spun, and the pain was unbearable, but she had no time to rest. The predator was close, too close. The fawn forced herself to stand, her legs shaking from the impact. The air was heavy with the scent of the predator, and its growl sent a jolt of terror through her body. She stumbled forward, her vision blurry, but she had to keep moving. The predator's footsteps were behind her, closer than ever. Her mind screamed for a way to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The forest was closing in, the trees creating a maze around her. Every movement felt like a struggle, but she pushed herself forward, each step harder than the last. The fawn stumbled through the woods, her body battered from the fall. Every step felt like a struggle as she pushed forward, her legs weak from exhaustion. The night seemed endless, with shadows that stretched far beyond the reach of the moonlight. She was lost, not just in the woods but within herself, in the vastness of her survival. The predator was still close, its growls echoing through the trees. But it wasn't just the predator that hunted her now. It was the weight of her isolation, the loneliness of a world that cared little for the weak. The forest was indifferent. Every branch, every leaf, was another reminder of her fragility. She wanted to rest, but there was no time. The predator's presence was like a dark cloud, following her wherever she went, its eyes watching her every move. Her mind screamed for relief, for any sign of safety. But there was nothing. Her only choice was to keep moving. The fawn's pace slowed, each movement more labored than the last. Her legs felt like they were made of stone, each step a monumental effort. The forest around her felt suffocating, like the walls of the world were closing in. She stopped for a moment, her breath shallow, trying to listen for any signs of pursuit. The predator was still near, its growls vibrating in the air. She could hear the trees rustling, the sound of something moving in the dark, but when she turned her head, there was nothing. It was the quiet before the storm, the moment just before the predator struck. The fawn's instincts screamed at her to run, to get away, but her body refused to obey. She was too tired, too broken. The predator's eyes gleamed from behind the trees, just a shadow in the darkness, waiting for its moment. She knew she couldn't keep running forever, but for now, she had to. The silence that followed was suffocating. The fawn couldn't hear the predator anymore, but that only made her more afraid. In the silence, she could feel the weight of the forest pressing in on her, the towering trees like silent sentinels, watching her every move. Her heart beat loudly in her chest, each thump a reminder that she was still alive, still fighting. But for how long? Predator had to be close. Her instincts were sharp, and even though she couldn't see it, she could feel it, watching her. The fawn's eyes flicked from shadow to shadow, searching for any sign of movement. The forest felt vast, but the fawn knew she was cornered. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Her body trembled, but she forced herself to stay still, to listen, to wait. The fawn's mind raced, but it was too tired to think clearly. The predator's presence was like a dark cloud hovering over her. She could feel the weight of it, but where was it? Just as the fawn's body was about to give in to the exhaustion, she heard a noise, a snap of a twig in the distance. Her heart skipped a beat, and her body went rigid. The predator was close. Too close. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but she couldn't move. It was as if her body was frozen in place, her legs too weak to carry her anymore. She could hear the predator's breathing now, heavy and steady, each exhale a reminder of how near death was. The forest felt smaller, the trees closing in around her, their twisted branches like hands reaching out to trap her. The fawn's chest heaved, each breath a struggle, but her body refused to comply. She wanted to run, but she was paralyzed with fear. The predator was just behind her, and she knew, with a sickening certainty, that there was no way to outrun it. The fawn's body felt like it was made of stone, each step heavier than the last. But she kept moving, driven by the faint hope that she could escape. Her legs burned, and her breath was ragged, but there was something in the air, something she couldn't quite grasp, that pushed her forward. She stumbled again, almost falling, but caught herself just in time. The forest around her had changed. The trees were no longer twisted and dark. The path ahead seemed clearer. The fawn's eyes darted to the side, catching a glimpse of something, a flicker of light. Could it be? Could this be the escape she had been hoping for? She pushed herself forward, her body protesting with every movement, but she couldn't stop now. The predator was still behind her, its presence like a constant weight on her shoulders. It was close, but the fawn refused to let it catch her. The forest had grown quiet, unnervingly so. The fawn's body, still bruised and battered from the previous night, moved sluggishly as she continued her trek. Her muscles ached from exhaustion, and every step felt like a weight upon her. Yet, she knew she couldn't stop. The predator might be gone, but the forest had its own dangers. Hunger gnawed at her insides, making it harder to focus. Her senses, once sharp and alert, were now dull. She staggered beneath the weight of her fatigue, each movement more difficult than the last. Her limbs trembled with every step, but she pressed on, searching for food, for anything that would ease the hunger that threatened to overtake her. The stillness of the forest was oppressive, and the trees towered like silent witnesses to her struggle. With each passing moment, she felt smaller, more fragile. Yet, in the back of her mind, there was a spark of determination. The air had shifted, growing heavier with each passing hour. The fawn's steps had become slower, her mind fogged by hunger. Her stomach growled, but there was nothing left to forage. She had searched every corner of the forest and it had become clear. She wasn't going to find food here. Her body had given everything it could, and now it was beginning to fail her. She collapsed in the soft dirt beneath a tree, her legs too weak to support her any longer. The exhaustion had caught up with her, and now the only thing she could do was rest. For a moment everything was still. The world around her seemed to fade, and the only sound she could hear was the rhythmic thumping of her heart. But even as she rested, she knew the danger wasn't far behind. The forest was full of predators, and without the energy to flee, she was vulnerable. As the fawn lay still, her mind raced. She could hear the distant rustle of leaves, a whisper in the wind that seemed to beckon her. But there was something more. The forest wasn't just a place to rest anymore. It was a place of danger. She couldn't afford to fall asleep, even if her body begged for rest. Every muscle ached, and every breath felt like it took more energy than it should. She tried to focus on the sounds around her, any indication of another predator lurking in the shadows, but all she could hear was the wind. It was unnerving, the silence before a storm. But as she stood up, pushing through the pain, the forest seemed to breathe with her. The trees shifted, and a distant howl echoed through the underbrush. It was a warning, a reminder of how close the edge of survival really was. The fawn's eyes darted nervously, but there was no time to dwell on the fear. The only option now was forward. She moved cautiously, trying to listen, to hear every crack of a twig or rustle of leaves. The forest wasn't going to let her go without a fight, and neither was she. The fawn continued through the forest, her steps slow and deliberate. Her body had begun to tire again, but there was no turning back now. Every instinct in her screamed for her to keep moving, to escape the lurking threat. The sound of the predator's howl was still fresh in her ears, a reminder that danger was never far behind. As she pressed forward, the air grew cooler, and the trees seemed to close in around her. The forest was no longer a refuge. It had become a prison, each step taking her further into its depths. But she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. The predator had been relentless, and now, with every step she took, she could feel the weight of the hunt growing closer. The fawn's eyes flicked back to the shadows, her body braced for another chase. But this time she wouldn't run. She would outlast the hunt. She would make the predator work for it. Her legs were weak, but her resolve had hardened. Her body was pushing past its limits, but the fawn kept moving. The weight of the forest pressed down on her, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Every corner she turned, every step she took, the forest seemed to narrow in on her. She could feel the predator's presence still lurking, watching from the shadows. The moon had completely disappeared behind the clouds, leaving the forest in near total darkness. The only sounds were her ragged breathing and the distant howls of creatures in the night. The fawn's eyes were wide, but the terror she felt was now more of a distant echo. Her hunger, her pain, all of it had become part of the forest's rhythm. The forest had become her battleground, and she was a part of its never-ending cycle. The fawn moved deeper into the forest, the sense of urgency in her steps growing stronger. The predator's presence was no longer a faint worry in the back of her mind. It was real, undeniable, and growing closer with every moment. But there was something else, something she couldn't place. A strange sense of calm had settled over her as the forest's familiar sounds filled her ears. It was the quiet before the storm, and the fawn could feel it. The trees seemed to whisper, their branches twisting unnaturally, almost as if they were warning her of something. She couldn't shake the feeling that the forest itself was shifting, turning against her. The predator had been a constant shadow, but now something deeper stirred in the dark. She could feel it pressing in on her, something more dangerous than any animal. The fawn's breath caught as she heard a snap in the distance, a crack of a branch too loud to ignore. Her eyes widened as she turned toward the sound, but there was nothing there. The forest had gone completely still, as though it were holding its breath. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to run, but she was paralyzed with fear. She couldn't explain it, but the stillness of the forest was more terrifying than the predator. The shadows seemed to press in on her, tightening like a noose. Her ears rang with the eerie silence, and the weight of her surroundings felt unbearable. Her heart raced, but her legs remained rooted to the ground. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. A flicker of movement. The silhouette of something moving between the trees. Something big, something powerful. The fawn's pulse quickened. The predator was not the only danger she had to fear. The forest had its own secrets, and now, it seemed those secrets were coming for her. The fawn's instincts kicked in as the shadow moved closer. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she backed away, her body moving on its own. The predator's presence had always been a constant, but this was different. There was a new danger now, one that felt ancient, primal. The fawn's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening, but there was no time for logic. The forest, once familiar and comforting, had become a labyrinth of shadows and deceit. The trees, once her sanctuary, now felt like walls closing in on her. The ground beneath her hooves shifted, and she stumbled, falling to the dirt. Panic surged within her as she scrambled to her feet. The figure was closer now, and the fawn could hear the rhythmic sound of its steps, each one growing louder. It wasn't just the predator she had to fear anymore. The forest itself was conspiring against her. She had no choice but to run, but the shadows followed her, closing in like a cage. Whatever was out there was relentless. She had no time to figure out what it was, only to survive. The fawn's breath was ragged, and her body ached from the effort of running. Her legs burned, and her mind felt foggy with exhaustion. But there was no time to rest. The predator was still close, its presence like a weight pressing down on her chest. The fawn's senses were stretched to their limit, every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves sending a jolt of panic through her. She had lost track of how long she had been running, how far she had gone. The forest had become a blur, a maze of trees and shadows, and she was trapped within it. But then, as if by some miracle, she saw it, a clearing up ahead. A brief, fleeting hope filled her chest. If she could just make it there, she might find some relief, some chance of escape. She pushed herself harder, her muscles protesting with every step. The clearing was close now, just within reach, but the predator was right behind her. Its growls, a constant reminder that she wasn't safe yet. She wasn't sure if she could make it, but she had to try. There was no other choice. The clearing was just within reach, but the fawn's strength was running out. She could feel her legs beginning to give out, her body trembling with the weight of exhaustion and fear. But she kept pushing forward. The clearing was her only hope. The predator's growls echoed louder, its steps growing faster. She could hear it, smell it. It was close, too close. The fawn's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of how much she had left to lose. Her legs faltered, and for a moment, she thought she might fall. But she caught herself, her instincts kicking in, forcing her to keep going. The clearing was just a few steps away now, but the predator's claws scraped the ground behind her, and she could feel its breath on her tail. She leaped into the clearing, her hooves hitting the ground hard. She didn't stop to look back. She couldn't. She just had to keep moving. The forest was no longer her ally. It was her battleground, and she was still fighting. The fawn's heart raced as she sprinted through the clearing, her legs like lead, every movement feeling slower than the last. The clearing she had so desperately reached now felt too small, too exposed. Her eyes darted to the shadows, but there was nowhere to hide. The predator's growls echoed through the trees, a constant reminder that it was closing in. The fawn could hear its heavy steps, the sound of claws scraping the earth with each stride. It was too close now. She had no more strength to run, no more stamina to flee. Her body was near its breaking point. Clearing was too open, and the predator was too fast. She couldn't outrun it anymore, but she couldn't stop. She had made it this far. She couldn't let the forest take her now. Desperation clawed at her chest as the predator's growls grew louder. She needed a plan, something, anything to survive. The trees loomed around her, offering no shelter. Her only chance was to stand her ground and fight, to outwit the predator, to survive in a world that never showed mercy. With every breath, the fawn could feel the predator's presence drawing nearer, the ground beneath her hooves shaking with the rhythm of its pursuit. There was no time left for hesitation, no room for fear. She could no longer run. Her only option was to face the predator head-on. Her body was bruised and tired, but her spirit refused to break. In the moment before the predator struck, the fawn's instincts kicked in, and a burst of adrenaline flooded her veins. She turned to face her pursuer, her small body trembling but her resolve hardening. The predator hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the fawn to gather her strength. She sprang into motion, leaping toward the predator, her body propelled by sheer survival instinct. The battle for her life was no longer a passive flight. She was in the fight now, and she would do whatever it took to survive. The predator, startled by her sudden move, staggered backward for a moment. This was her chance. The fawn's heart pounded, but her focus was sharp. She would survive. She had to. The predator lunged forward, its jaws wide open, but the fawn darted to the side, narrowly avoiding the sharp teeth that had aimed for her throat. She felt the predator's breath on her fur as it passed, and the ground trembled beneath her as the force of its momentum carried it forward. Her heart raced, but there was no time to dwell on the close call. She was already moving, her legs carrying her farther into the clearing, her body driven by a primal need to escape. The predator was relentless, but so was she. Every movement was a calculated effort, every instinct honed to survive. She turned once again, facing the predator with renewed focus. It was fast, but she was quick, faster than she had ever been. Her small body was no match for the predator's power, but her agility was her strength. She would have to outsmart it. Her eyes locked onto the predator's, and for a brief moment, the two of them were locked in an intense battle of wills. Neither would back down. Neither could afford to. The fawn's heart pounded in her chest as she made her move. Her legs were on fire, but she couldn't stop now. The predator was circling, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The fawn couldn't keep dodging forever. She had to end this fight. In a sudden burst of energy, she charged at the predator, using the element of surprise to her advantage. She aimed for the predator's vulnerable flank, trying to force it back with a swift and decisive move. The predator snarled, surprised by the fawn's sudden counterattack, and stumbled backward. But it recovered quickly, its eyes burning with fury. The fawn's body was exhausted and her movements slower now, but her determination was stronger than ever. She would not let this predator take her life. The forest had tried to break her, but she was still standing. She would face whatever came next, because she had learned something essential. Survival was not just about running. It was about fighting, about using everything she had to endure. The predator's growls filled the air as it lunged again, but this time, the fawn was ready. She swerved to the side using the predator's momentum against it. She darted in, delivering a swift strike to its vulnerable side. The predator snarled in pain, but it was still too strong, too fast. The fawn's body screamed for rest, but she couldn't afford to stop. With each attack, each counter, she could feel the predator's fury rising. But there was something else in her, something deeper than fear, something that told her she wasn't done yet. She kept moving, always a step ahead, always staying just out of reach. The battle was relentless, but in the fawn's eyes, there was only one goal now: survival. She would not give up. Her heart beat faster as she continued to evade the predator's attacks, her body exhausted but her spirit unwavering. She had come this far, and she would not fall now. The fawn's chest heaved as she retreated to the edge of the clearing, her body trembling from exhaustion. The predator's growls echoed in the distance, but this time she felt a strange shift within her. She had evaded the attack, but the battle had taken its toll. Every muscle screamed in protest, and her once alert senses were now dull. The predator was relentless, and she could hear it circling in the shadows, waiting for its next opportunity. But something had changed in her, an instinct had awoken. The fawn had learned the price of survival. She no longer feared the predator as she once did. Her eyes narrowed, and a sense of clarity washed over her. Predator may have had strength and speed, but she had something else, resilience. The forest had been unforgiving, but now the fawn stood at the edge of her struggle. She wasn't just a victim of the hunt anymore. She was a survivor, and it was time to prove it. The predator would come for her again, but this time she would not run. She would face it with everything she had left. As the predator closed in once again, the fawn's mind raced. She had survived this long, but would she make it through the final test? The air was thick with tension. As the predator's growls grew louder, its pace quickening with every step. The fawn could feel the ground beneath her hooves shaking with the predator's approach. Her heart pounded, each beat a reminder of how close the end was. But she wouldn't give in. Not now. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to flee into the unknown, but the fawn stood her ground. She had no more strength to run. She had no more energy left to escape. The predator's eyes gleamed as it stalked closer, but the fawn remained still, gathering every ounce of strength she had left. It was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a test of her will. She wasn't ready to die. Not here. Not today. She would face the predator on her own terms, and if she fell, she would fall fighting. The predator lunged, its body a blur of motion as it closed the distance between them. The fawn reacted instantly, moving with a speed and agility she didn't know she still had. She ducked, narrowly avoiding the predator's snapping jaws, and rolled to the side. The predator turned quickly, its eyes flashing with rage, but the fawn was already back on her feet, her body moving with a new purpose. The battle had shifted. It was no longer about escaping. It was about surviving, about pushing past the limits of what she thought was possible. She wasn't running anymore. She was fighting for her life, and she would use every advantage she had. The predator attacked again, but the fawn was ready this time. She dodged and struck, her hooves connecting with the predator's side. It staggered, surprised by the fawn's newfound aggression, and for a moment, the fawn could see the uncertainty in its eyes. She had earned a moment of advantage, but how long would it last? For a moment, the predator hesitated. It had underestimated the fawn. The fawn's heart raced, but she was already moving again. Her legs were trembling from exhaustion, but her will to survive burned brightly within her. The predator attacked once more, but this time, the fawn was ready. She didn't hesitate. She struck first, kicking out with all her remaining strength. The blow landed squarely on the predator's side, and the predator let out a surprised growl of pain. It staggered back, momentarily stunned. The fawn took advantage of this, circling behind the predator, looking for any opportunity to land another blow. The predator, now furious, spun to face her, its eyes burning with rage. But the fawn didn't back down. She had been pushed to her limits, but she refused to be defeated. This was her fight, her battle for survival, and she would not lose. Her body screamed for rest, but the fawn stood her ground, ready for the next attack. The predator staggered, wounded but still dangerous. It was more cautious now, circling the fawn, its movements slow and deliberate. The fawn's legs were trembling with fatigue, but her resolve was stronger than ever. She could see the predator's calculating eyes, but this time, it wasn't her who was afraid. She was ready. As the predator lunged again, the fawn made her move. She ducked low, and in a flash of instinct, she charged forward, using her small size and speed to her advantage. The predator tried to swipe at her, but she was already behind it, leaping toward its exposed side. The fawn's hooves struck with incredible force, and for the first time, the predator let out a yelp of pain. It stumbled backward, its body shaking with shock and fury. The fawn had struck a critical blow. She had won this round. But she knew the battle wasn't over. The predator wasn't finished yet. But neither was she. The fawn's body was trembling, each muscle sore from the relentless struggle. She had fought the predator, outmaneuvered it, and survived countless close calls. But now she faced something worse. The weight of her survival. The forest around her felt different, quieter, but there was no safety in silence. The predator was gone for now, but the fawn knew that the wilderness was never kind, and the dangers of the world didn't disappear just because the immediate threat had passed. Her breath was shallow as she moved through the trees, the adrenaline of the battle fading, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. She had learned how to fight, how to outsmart, and outlast. But survival in the wild wasn't a victory. It was a constant struggle. The fawn's path was no longer clear, and she could feel the burden of the journey pressing on her. Her hope was no longer naive. The forest was a place of both danger and refuge, and she was its most vulnerable inhabitant. But for the first time she understood something. Survival was more than escaping death. It was about facing the wilderness on her terms, no matter what came next. The fawn moved deeper into the forest, but her steps had slowed, each one deliberate. The world around her seemed still, almost too still, and the trees, once her shelter, now felt like silent witnesses to her endurance. She had come a long way, physically and emotionally, and yet she knew the true test was still ahead. She was no longer the fragile creature that first fled from the predator's pursuit. She had learned to fight, to think, to survive. But there was a weight to survival that the fawn could not escape. It wasn't just about the battles fought or the hunts evaded. It was the quiet understanding that the wilderness was unforgiving, even to those who had learned its ways. The fawn's mind raced as she navigated the forest, but the forest was now more than just a maze of trees and shadows. It was her home. The realization hit her like a shock. She had become a part of this world, not just a passing presence. And in that world she would remain, because there was no other option but to endure. The fawn paused at the edge of a small creek, the sound of flowing water soothing in the otherwise quiet forest. She bent down to drink, her body moving instinctively. The water was cool and refreshing, a rare moment of relief amidst the chaos of survival. As she drank, her mind wandered. She thought of the predator, of the battles, of the hunger, and the exhaustion. But there was no time to linger on past struggles. Her eyes flicked to the sky above, where the first signs of dawn were breaking through the trees. A new day. A new beginning. The fawn finished drinking and stood up, taking a moment to feel the soft earth beneath her hooves. She had made it this far, but the path ahead was still uncertain. The forest was vast, and the dangers it held were unpredictable. Yet, there was something in the fawn's heart that felt different now. An understanding of her place in this world. A quiet acceptance of the harshness of nature. Her survival was no longer just a battle against the predator. It was a battle against the forces of nature itself. But, in that battle, she had found strength. The fawn continued walking, but now, each step was measured. The forest was no longer an enemy. It was a part of her. She had learned to listen to its rhythms, to respect its silence. Her movements were quieter now, more deliberate as she navigated the dense underbrush. The path ahead was unclear, but she no longer felt lost. She had found her place within the vast wilderness, not just as a survivor, but as a part of the cycle of life that flowed through the trees, the water, the sky. There were no guarantees of safety, no promises that the predator wouldn't return, but the fawn understood something essential now. The forest would never be kind, but it would always be her home. The sense of isolation had faded. She was no longer alone. The fawn paused once more, lifting her head to look out across the vast wild world before her. She had faced the worst the wilderness could offer, and she had endured. The fawn continued on, her journey stretching ahead. The forest was no longer just a place of survival. It had become a part of her story, her legacy. The predator had faded into the past, and now the fawn carried with her the lessons of the wild. She had learned the price of survival, and in that knowledge she had gained strength. The forest was vast and full of unknowns, but she was no longer afraid. She was no longer a victim of the hunt. She was a part of the wild, an active participant in the cycle of life that would continue long after she had gone. The predator had taught her to fight, the hunger had taught her to endure, and the silence had taught her to listen. She moved forward with purpose, knowing the forest would always be a place of danger and wonder. But now, it was her home.